Hello, YouTubes. Welcome back to the channel. I know, it's been a hot minute. Truth is, I just haven't been doing a whole lot of woodworking this year. I've been busy with a lot of other things, so it hasn't been a whole lot of woodworking going on, not a lot of wood turning going on, so not a lot of videos. And I wasn't gonna post a video for this particular project. I've turned lots of Christmas ornaments in the past. I have several videos on that. I hate rehashing the same material over and over and over, but I guess when you're talking about wood turning, it is kind of the same material over and over and over. But my buddy Double D over at Tournage du Bois posted a video of his Christmas ornament that he turned, and I'm going to link to that down below. I'll pin that in the top comment, and you guys can go check out his video. Really cool ornament. I just thought I'd follow suit and post a video for my ornament as well. I've got some straps here that I glued up. These two pieces here were flame maple, and this is just a offcut from a guitar that I built a couple years ago. And I thought I'd just glue that up, see if we can turn the ball element out of this. Glued it onto a waste block so that I can try to get a ball element out of that. For the finials, I've got this piece of flame koa, and I think this will make pretty cool looking finials. I think the contrast between these woods will look really nice. So let's take this over to the lathe, see if we can turn a Christmas ornament. So what I thought I'd do with this video is just try to go through the process of how I do my Christmas ornaments. Now, I'm no Christmas ornament expert. I'm not even a wood turning expert. I'm pretty much a novice at best. So take this with a grain of salt, but if you're interested in how I go about doing my Christmas ornaments, hopefully this will help some of you out and get you to making some cool Christmas ornaments yourself. This will be a little bit more instructional than I normally do. I'll show you the process. I've got this chucked up in my chuck jaws, tailstock up to it. It's not very straight, but we're gonna round off these corners and get this thing rounded off, and then we'll make a ball element out of this, and I'll show you how I do that. So the first thing I'm gonna do is grab my face mask, start rounding this thing off. So let's get to that. So my lathe does not have a speed readout on it, so I'm just flinging this thing up, I would say about 80% of full speed. And I'm gonna take a bowl gouge. This is my Robert Sorby 1/2 inch, and I'm gonna start nibbling away at those corners and see how we do. Okay, we've got this thing kind of trued up a little bit better. I see it's got to go a little bit smaller because we got some glue showing right there. So that tells me this side's not exactly smooth. It's going to look a little bit weird with the stripes, but it was just a bunch of scrap. Threw it together. It is what it is. So I want to mark this thing out and try to get my dimensions laid out. Now, what I've been doing this year is kind of more of a flattened out, more of an oblong, not really a ball. The problem with a ball is, if you try to make a ball and you don't make it symmetrical, the eye can see that and you end up with like an egg shape or something. So I've been trying to like squish them out so they're not as tall as they are wide, more of an oval shape, because it's easier to hide mistakes. And I kind of like the look of it, but yeah, helps me hide some mistakes. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get some tools. So I've got my calipers laid out to the size that I want. See if we can center that up. And I'm just gonna kind of fake it a little bit. Just by eye, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're not going for show quality here. We want something like that. Like I said, that's nowhere close to as wide as it's gonna be. The height is gonna be a lot shorter, right? And I'm doing that on purpose. So now we're gonna just spin this up, mark these. There's that one. There's that one. So that'll be the top and the bottom of our ball element. So the first thing I'm gonna do is take my parting tool and kind of part these off. Now you guys are gonna see me use this parting tool that is kind of ground in a Bedan style. And this is new for me. I just did this. I had an extra parting tool, so I ground it to a Bedan. And I kind of like it. So I don't know if you guys are interested in trying this. Go ahead and, if you got an extra one, grind it to a Bedan and see if you like it. But I'm learning that I really like this thing. So I'm gonna part this off at these two spots just so that I can establish the height here. Okay, now I've got that parted off. I'm gonna start rounding these shoulders over. try to make this thing look like a ball. So we're already most of the way there. Let's stop and take a look at this. It does look like a ball. A little bit rough over here. I need to just kind of smooth it out a little bit more, but we're getting there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this skew chisel. Now, those of you who are regulars to my channel know that me and the skew chisel do not get along. This is the devil's can opener, and it will make a mess of things really quick, but I'm going to use it as a scraper to just kind of define these edges a little bit and make it more uniform from one side to the other. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I think I got that where I can sand it to where I want it. So what I need to do is I need to move the tailstock out of my way because I got to trim this up some. So we're just going to back that off, come around here, and work on that for a bit. Yep, that looks good. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. I think I can sand it from there. Now, don't worry about this shoulder here yet. I'll get to that in a little bit. Show you how we deal with that. First thing we're going to do, though, is I'm going to take a Forstner bit and drill a hole through this thing so that I can make a tenon on the finials that will go in these. And what I use for that, I use a 1/2" Forstner bit. And the reason that I do that is because it makes it very easy to use a 1/2" open-end wrench to put the tenon on the finials. And you'll see that later, it'll make more sense. But these two things fit together very well, so I'm going to use them. 1/2" Forstner bit, 1/2" open-end wrench. I don't know what that is in millimeters. You guys will have to figure it out. Now we're going to slow the lathe speed down some because we don't need it super high to drill this hole. And I've got a piece of tape marked on here. This was kind of the depth that I was using for the rest of the ornaments that I made, but I don't think I need to go that deep on this one. Now I'm going to start my sanding process, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start with 120 grit, and I'm going to work all the way up through 180, 240, 320, and 400. And I know sanding's not the most exciting thing, so I'll spare you most of that, but I want to make sure you know what grits I'm using, and this is lathe speed is about 50% of whatever top speed it has. And if you aren't happy with your shape, you can take some 80 grit and refine it a little bit more. I'm pretty happy with it, so we're just going to come in with the 120 right off the bat. And I'll shape it a little bit, but not a whole lot. Now that we've got it sanded, I want to take a somewhat clean rag and just kind of wipe some of the dust off of it. I don't care to go through all the trouble of getting out the air compressor to blow it off, so I just take a rag and wipe it off. It's good enough. Now that we got it wiped off, it's time for the sanding paste. Now, I'm going to use Brad's sanding paste, partly because I won this from a giveaway on Double D's channel last year, so thank you, Double D. It is getting used. Secondly, because as a native Texan, I just like the fact that it's handcrafted in Texas. Great product, but I'm going to show you guys how I use this, because I see some guys using it a little crazy, in my opinion. So it doesn't take of this stuff to work well. So I'm just going to get like that much. See, that's it. That's all. I'm not going to slather it on there. I'm just going to put a little bit on there. And I'm not kidding. That's it. And the rest of that, I'm going to wipe back off into the jar. See that? I'm going to save that for later because it's not exactly the cheapest thing in the world. It works really well, but I kind of want to make it stretch as far as I can. It doesn't take much. Let's go ahead and turn the lathe up to about 50% speed. And then we'll just polish this a little bit with the sanding paste. And then when we've done that, we're going to turn the rag around. Take the paste off. And I'm not flinging the lathe up super high either. It doesn't have to be. We're not going for heat here. We're just going for, this is kind of the equivalent of like a 1200 grit or so. And see, the rag's kind of clean there. We're going to come over here to this side. And that's good. And then we're going to turn that back down. And then we're going to come in with Brad's tongue wax finish. Now, another great product, another thing that I also see some guys just slather it on there, and I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a very small amount. Like that. That's it. That's all I need. It doesn't take a lot. And I'm just going to put that on there like that. And then, like I said, I'm literally going to wipe that back in there. Save the rest for later. They do recommend that you let this sit for 15-20 minutes to let it soak into the wood. I find that, honestly, it doesn't seem to make any difference to me the way the finish comes out if you let it sit there and soak in, or if you just buff it right now. So I don't bother with waiting that 15 to 20 minutes because I don't think it makes any difference. It'll look kind of glossy on the first day, and then within 6 hours, it kind of takes on a matte finish. You're not going to get a super gloss out of it anyway, so if that's what you're trying to do, you'll probably need to use some other product or clear it with a high gloss clear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin this up to about 50%, and then we're just going to start buffing this a little bit. And then we're going to crank the lathe up really super high. Turn the rag around and get some heat in this thing to melt the wax that's in that into a hard finish. And I can feel the heat on my fingertips and just kind of move that around a little bit. And that's it. Look at that. That's it. Looks great, right? I'm pretty happy with it. Now, show you how we part this off. So this is my Robert Sorby thin parting tool, and it's got a little bit of a flute in there. If you look real close, you can kind of see that it's fluted. This side goes down, very similar to a bidan. And I find that I have to back the tool rest up quite a bit because it is a little bit long. And we're just going to come in here and part this thing off right here. Now, when I get down to there, I'm going to stop. And this is a trick that I learned from an engineer friend of mine who does a lot of metal turning. Take a screwdriver, stick it in here, slow the lathe down so it doesn't go flying. And then you'll notice that that hole that I drilled through goes clear into there. So it was very easy to turn that off. And we caught it on the screwdriver without it flying away from. This little lip here, don't worry about that. So we'll deal with that in a little bit. I'll show you how to do that. But you can kind of see that it's a little bit squat as far as how wide it is. And that's kind of what I was going for because, again, it hides the fact that it's not a perfect circle. This little bit here, we're just going to take over to the bench, take a razor knife and cut that off. It'll be just fine. So what you can see here is I've gone to my drive spur and a live center, and I've marked the ends of this with a little indent there on both ends, and we're going to chuck this thing up. And yes, I'm aware that it's wider this way than this way. We're just going to round it off. So we'll stick that in there, and then we'll come in here and get this lined up with the other hole, squish it down on that drive spur. And then you'll notice I've gone to a longer tool rest, and the reason for that is because I want to be able to reach the full distance of this thing so that I can round it off altogether. And another thing that I'm trying to do is I'm going to look down through here at the bedways to line my tool rest up with that so that I know that it's straight. We're going to grab my Shopsmith roughing gouge and we're going to rough this thing out. And again, I'm going to fling this thing up pretty high, like maybe 65-70% of full speed, because I want to be able to rough this out without it skipping off of those shoulders. Okay, I think we've got it rounded off enough. Still a little bit of a flat spot here, but what I want to do is I want to get it back in the chuck jaws so that I can hold it a little more secure for all of this. And I think we're good enough there. I kind of missed on getting it perfectly centered up. I can see this flat spot's definitely on that side, but not on this side, which means I got it shifted off a little bit, but it'll be okay. Let's get it back in the chuck jaws and then we'll go from there. Okay, we got it in the chuck jaws. I used the hole that was in the end of it to center it back up in the tailstock. And as you can see, it's running about as true as it was before. Not too bad. So I've gone back to my shorter tool rest because we only need to work on a small portion of it for the bottom finial. I always start with the bottom finial first, and I've got a couple layout tools that I'm gonna grab. So this ruler, I have measured out basically, if you take the height of the ball and run it on here, it's 3 times the height of the ball. And the reason that I've done that is because this took me a long time to really grasp, but when I started accepting it, I feel like my Christmas ornament started looking better. Artists will tell you all the time about the rule of thirds, and it happens in nature a lot too. So that's what I try to do is I want the finial, the lower finial, to be 3 times the height of the ball. And it seems to make my ornaments look more aesthetically pleasing. I'm gonna grab my pencil, put that against the end of there, mark that, and that'll be the length of the bottom finial. Now, I've got one other caliper set, and this is the height of the finial. So again, if you took that and just walked it down here, it's 3 times the height of the ball element, right? So this is the height of the ball element. I wanna make another mark, and the reason for that is I want from here down to just be a thin little finial. And then whatever design that I put in it, I want to take place right here. So again, it's 1/3 of the length of the finial. The focus will be up here, and then this will just be a thin finial tip, and it'll make it just looks more aesthetically pleasing. I don't know why. The rule of thirds is a natural thing. Don't try to deny it. I'm gonna spin up the lathe, mark that spot there, and we're gonna mark that spot there. Okay, and these are the key elements of our finial. This is the length. This is where I want all of the design to happen. And then this part just taper down to a point. Now, again, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab my bidan and we're gonna part this off most of the way, but not all of it. Let me grab my face mask and then I'll get to that. And now that I've got it trued up a little bit more, we've got the lathe turned way up because this thing's kind of skinny. In the center, it rotates slower. A bigger object would rotate faster out here. We need to turn the lathe speed up pretty high. And I've got it up probably 85%. Okay, there's our tenon. Here's our bottom finial. Let's start working. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to come in here with the big Robert Sorby 1/2 inch. This is the biggest gouge I've got. I really like it, but it'll hog off some material pretty quick. And the first thing that I want to do is we're going to take from this line down and just taper it. And you'll see what I mean when I start doing that, but I just want to taper it towards the end just to carve the bulk off. Okay, so we've got all of that bulk cleared out. Now I'm gonna take a little bit out of this just to kind of remove some bulk. So we've got this thing kind of roughed out. I don't want this shoulder here to be as big as the shoulder here. Otherwise it starts looking too heavy. It's like the bottom just has too much mass to it. So I'm gonna take a bunch of material off of this to squeeze that in a bit, but I wanna try to maintain the position of that shoulder. So if I take some from there, I'm gonna take some from there. You'll see, I wanna try to stay right there with it, but I wanna shrink that down some so it's not as big as this one. And that looks a little more pleasing as far as the size of this one compared to this one. So I'm going to switch to a smaller gouge and we'll start cleaning this up a little bit more. And I'm going to work on this end here. What I like to do is I like to work from the tailstock end towards the headstock, because when you get this part down here thinned out, if you're trying to work this way, it starts moving a lot and it'll get away from you in a hurry. One of the ways that I do this is I leave the tailstock here pretty much the whole time I'm turning this. And yes, it is poking a hole in the end of the finial, but if somebody picks up your Christmas ornament, looks at the end of it and says, oh, there's a hole in it, you kick them out of your house. You don't need that kind of negativity in your life. Now I'm going to switch to an even smaller gouge. So we're just going to keep going. Now you can see how thin we've got this, and kind of where I want it to be. It's thin enough that I think it works really well, but it's not so thin that it's going to break. I also need these to be able to be packed away for, various years. You put them on your tree 1 year, pack it away for a year, bring it back out. I don't want this to break while it's in the packing, so this is about as thin as I like to go. Pretty thin. I think it works. Let's keep shaping this tip here, and then we'll work our way back up to this. Now to finish this tip off, I'm going to come back with the devil's can opener and just kind of clean it up a little bit. And I think that's good. From there, I think we can sand that. Okay, now we'll start working on this. And what I like to do is try to roll a ball in the middle of this and then bring those two shoulders down to it. So let's see what we can do. Okay, we've got our basic shape here. I'm going to switch to a smaller gouge again and kind of work on it some more. That's why I don't like the devil's can opener. So let's see if we can clean that up. Gonna have to do it. Still got a little bit of a gouge right there, but now the problem that I have is, since I had to turn this down smaller, this is too big now, so we need to bring that down. Okay, I think I can live with that. We're gonna sand it from here. Now this one, I'm definitely gonna start with the 80 grit because I gotta take out some pretty ugly spots and I wanna smooth this out a little bit more, but I'm gonna start the sanding with the tailstock still in there. Blade speed at about 50%. And we're using this 80 grit to kind of shape this lower portion here and kind of clean it up a bit. So this is going to be a pretty heavy sanding right here. The rest of the grits will go pretty quick. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, now we'll move the tailstock out of the way and go through the rest of the grits. And again, after sanding, come back with a somewhat clean rag and just wipe it off, get most of the dust off of it. And that is already looking spectacular. And then back with Brad's sanding paste. Again, just a tiny little bit. And then we're going to rub that on here. And then we're going to take off any excess and put it back in the jar. It doesn't take that much. I do want to make sure that I kind of roll this edge over onto the inside a little bit, because part of that will be seen, but not all of it. And then we're going to crank this up a little bit. Come back to the clean side of the rag. Come in with the tongue wax. Again, the tiniest of tiny amounts. Put the rest back in the jar. And I'm even going to wipe off some more, because that was way too much. See that? See all that? Put that back in the jar. Save it for later. Crank that up a bit. Rub it in. Turn the rag around. Spin this thing up really fast. And then start building that heat. Look at that. It does have a scar right there, but I'm going to leave it as a reminder of my catch. We need to part this thing off, so I'll show you how I size that tenon, and then we'll go over the rest of it. Like I said, 1/2-inch wrench. Going to take the bidan to it and bring that down until this 1/2-inch wrench just fits over it. Perfect. Now, I'm going to come in here at an angle and I'm going to undercut this so that the ball element sits up inside of it a bit. It's a little bit awkward to get at, and you got to be very gentle. This is a good spot to get a catch. And just undercut that like that. And then to part it the rest of the way off, I don't. I'm gonna get my Japanese pole saw and I'm gonna cut it off instead of trying to part it off. It's just too dangerous to try to part that off. So we're just gonna come in here with the pole saw and ever so gently take it off. Now, back over here at the bench, we've got our finial for the bottom half. And that's a pretty good thin finial, still got a lot of strength to it. You saw how much I was able to really grab onto it while it was on the lathe to buff that finish into it. So what we're gonna do here is I like to use Type Bond. You can use super glue, I guess, but I find that super glue is a little brittle, and over time it will break. It'll stress crack and it'll break. It's a very brittle glue, whereas the Type Bond seems to work really good. Now, remember that side that we cut off earlier? We're going to put that on the bottom finial and just kind of turn that down on there, give it a little rub. And then I'm going to look at it and try to find the grain that I like. I think I like that side right there. And I'm going to turn the side of the ball element that I like the most towards that and kind of make that the front. And then we're just going to turn this upside down, set it right there, and leave it alone. Now, back at the lathe, we're going to work on the top finial. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of clean off the bottom side of that. Then we're going to move our tailstock up, and it's totally okay if we poke a hole in the end of this. Now, this set of calipers I have set to the exact same size as the height of our ball element. According to the rule of third, the top finial should be half the height of the ball element so that it makes up 3. The ball element would be 2, the finial would be 1. I'm not going to do that because it just ends up being super short. So I'm going to go the same height as the ball element, put a mark here, and then that's how tall our top finial would be. And then again, we're going to take the bidan and put a tenon on this, and then we'll start shaping it. Let me get my face mask, and then we'll get started. Now again, we're going to take the big gouge, and I'm just going to angle this off for the most part. And then once we've got it tapered off, we can start really refining the details. Now, I like the width of this one to be a little bit smaller than the width of the bottom finial where it connects to the ball. So I've turned that down a little bit farther. And that was on purpose, just because I like the way that looks. So I'm going to go ahead and move the tailstock out of my way now because I want to kind of refine the shape of that. And I think we're at a point here where it's not sticking out there too far, so we can just like that. Now you can do some other things there. You can roll a ball in the middle of it to resemble what you did on the lower finial. You can do whatever you want. I kind of like a nice simple shape for the top because I want the focus to be on the ball element and what's going on right under it. So now I think we're going to go ahead and drill a hole in the end of this for mounting it. So we'll turn the lathe speed down some, and then I've got a drill bit chucked up that will fit my hook that I'm going to put in the end of here, and this will act as my pilot hole for that hook. And then it's time to sand. And then again, somewhat clean rag just to wipe the dust off. Come back with our sanding paste. Try not to tell Brad that I taught you guys how to save money. The rest of that back in there. And buff that in. Come in with the tongue wax finish. Just a tiny little bit. And there it is. Now we're going to size that tenon. And there we go. And then we'll undercut it just like we did the other one. Ever so carefully, ever so gently. And then we take one of these little eyelets, screw it in there while it's still on the lathe because it's easy to spin. You can just hold the eyelet, spin it in, and cut it free. And there we go. Now back here at the bench, we've got our top finial. The bottom finial is glued into the ball. In the time that it took us to turn this top finial, the glue will have swollen that tenon a little bit. So if it's a little bit loose, don't worry. It will seat itself in there. And as you can see, it's doing just fine. So we're going to take a little bit of glue, go around the top one as well. Stick that in there, give it a spin so that the glue goes all the way around. And then I'm going to look at it again, try to decide what I like as the front, which I think is this side here. And then I really like that. That's not quite set yet. And then, if you've ever wondered what all those holes in your bench are for, well, they're for letting your Christmas ornaments dry. And there you have it, guys. One Christmas ornament just like that. It's really that simple. And it's got a pretty thin finial, but not so thin that it'll break off. I think you can be proud of this. If you give it a try, make sure to post your comments down below and tell me how you did. I'd love to hear how you guys are doing on your turnings. And with that, I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks a lot.